So let's be honest, Drag Race Thailand Season 3 has been a travesty of a season from start to finish.
Van A tot Z.
And I was a really big fan of Drag Race Thailand Season 2 and the little bits I've been able to catch of Season 1. It used to be a powerful series that was not afraid to buck the trends of mainline Drag Race, was not afraid to stamp itself as something new and different, especially being the very first international franchise of all of them. This season has taken a distinct left turn. My name is Jer and I love to talk about the Drag Race editing, I love to talk about the story, I love to talk about the production of each season. And from the endless technical problems from the start of this season, including but not limited to the quality of the mic packs, the audio spiking, the terrible editing of this entire season, all the way down to confessional format, this has easily been one of the worst franchises in the entire Drag Race sphere. And I perceive Drag Race All-Stars 8, as well as many of the other All-Stars that were Flopzillas, and I even watched Drag Race Holland 2, which I was told is one of the worst seasons across the board. And let me just tell you, Holland 2 is leaps and bounds better than this season. This is probably one of the least watchable seasons of all of them. While I do think that the overall experience was wretched, there is a singular contributing factor to that wretchedness that I think could have been easily repaired had someone been a little more hands-on with it. And that is the format and the structure of the challenges. This season is not filled with a ton of queens, but yet it seems to kind of drag its feet through each one of the challenges, because this group, one, was not prepared for the level of challenges that they were going to be presented with, therefore having to adjust their energy all season, but also these challenges were not really suited with anybody in mind, where normally the Drag Race seasons try to adjust their energy towards the contestants in the room, try not to embarrass them to its best extent, and try to present them with things that they can easily handle. And the way that this season was structured was just one tumble after another, with only contestants like Frankie and ZP really thriving through the entirety of the competition, and Godlin sort of figuring out her energy as the season went. Most everyone else was sort of left to the wayside because the pacing was just not at the rate that they all needed to get where it needed to go. So today we are going to be restructuring the season, and we're going to try to make it a little more cohesive for this group. So let's quickly talk about the challenges as they happened. Episode 1, we have a non-elimination talent show. While I do love a talent show, I don't know if this was the right group for it. And I think especially now with how oversaturated the talent show is and the current rubric for a talent show, the majority of performances are a lip sync. And usually not that great of one because it's to one of their songs. And they are not trained writers and musicians and composers. So these songs are a little bit weak. If I could wave a magic wand, I would completely eliminate this show and just have it be a heavier focus on the photo shoot as well as the runway, but that would be a magic wand. Episode 2 is the pageant ball, where Srirasha Hot Sauce is eliminated. Still cannot get over the fact that her name is Srirasha Hot Sauce, and last season they had someone named Silver Sonic. Like, they really skirt around copyright over in Thailand, and I love it. This ball came far too early. One, the mic quality was still really awful, so with each contestant, the quality of their voices was bad. 2, they didn't change the music for any of the categories. Therefore, we got stuck with a 15-minute cut of You Wear It Well, which was exhausting. 3, I love Pangina, but she is not RuPaul, and she does not have the career entertainment, decades-long stamina to handle a 3-category ball with 11 contestants. That's 33 looks, and you could tell by about the midpoint that she hated her life and then she hated doing this challenge. Because think about it, you go through 11 looks, the girls leave and have to get into new drag, change their costumes, get ready for a new category, come out and present that, leave and do that all over again. That was probably a 12-hour production day with how many people were there and how long it takes to film Drag Race. And you could tell that Pangina was exhausted. You could tell that the judges were exhausted. I don't think they were ready for this level of shenanigans this early in the season. And this may be controversial, but I sometimes think that the earlier a ball is, the worse the level of product is going to be. The later we get it, the more the filler queens have been whittled down. So we're left with only the strongest of the strong, and therefore their packages are going to be really good. We get 12, maybe 16 really solid looks, as opposed to 33 meth looks with maybe 1 or 2 standouts in those. Plus, the parameters of such a dull textile like gingham was poorly executed for 11 entire looks. Certainly as we get deeper into the season and understand these queens' aesthetics better, it's a more apt challenge to give them a maybe top 4 or top 5. Episode 3 is girl groups, where Karamite went out, and the song they had to do was Sip Sip. Yet another challenge that I think came just a smidge too early. This was a really fun song in any case, but I'm never a fan of girl groups that are a little bit too big like this. I think in the situation of Handmaidens to Kitty Girls, that made sense because we had gone so deep into the season already and it was more of a Ru-turn format than a perform your best and try not to land in the bottom. I prefer girl groups that are 3 max. 4 is pushing it quite a bit because you don't get a full chance to understand the meaning of the lyrics because they're just rushing to get everything in with so many people. And we see this be very effective in Canada versus the World in season 1 and 2, where they've done 3 groups of 3 just to make sure that you get the full breadth of their talent, you get to see them stand out, and their lyrics are more impactful because they just have the space to do it. Plus, I think they just needed a little time to readjust their energy, and I think this challenge was too early in the season. Episode 4 is the acting challenge where Shotgun is out. I think honestly this acting challenge came at a great time. All things considered, this was one of the best scripts that I've seen probably across any Drag Race season. And that's saying a lot because it was packed into this season. And it was one of the better episodes of season 3 because of its timing. Episode 5 is the Snatch Game where Benze Diva is out. Again, I think this was just a smidge too early. I think it could have been scooted forward in an effort to create a little bit more cohesion with the energy of the group. Episode 6 is the Rusical where Siam is out. And from a lot of people that I've talked to, this is the episode they tapped out on. I actually loved the timing of this episode. I think everyone's energy was kind of where it needed to be, even if they weren't performed terribly well. I think this Rusical was pretty strong, if not quite long. Episode 7 is the Improv Duo Challenge where Gigi Ferocious is out. Wow, this really was one of the worst challenges probably ever across all time and space. At least that I have perceived. And especially this late in the season. It was so rapid and fast-paced, and there was not enough time for the girls to really get into it. And this challenge was so sloppily put together and placed in the season that they were able to include an entire Untucked into this episode because they had no other content. Maybe this challenge could have been another minute long, but I fear the cringe level would have increased tenfold with another minute on each group. In any case, this came way too late. Episode 8 is the Pride Makeover, where Nane is out. I love the premise of this makeover more than anything. I think the people that they pulled in to be made over were great, and I love the story that they had to tell. I entirely have a problem with Nane going home, but that's a different video. I do think the timing of this challenge was correct. Episode 9 is the Talk Show Challenge, where yet again we had a non-elimination. I disagree with the non-elimination, and I also feel a little bit strange about the position of this challenge. I go back and forth on it because I love the idea of a talk show challenge despite them all feeling and coming across cursed as hell. I do think maybe it should have been an episode or 2 earlier because I don't think it's great energy for the penultimate challenge. Plus, with 4 categories, 3 of them being synergistic trio categories, past, present, future, your idol sticks out like a sore thumb, and either 1 or 2 more categories to work in conjunction with your idol so it didn't stick out so badly would maybe have created a little more cohesiveness in the episode. So now let's restructure these and get into how I think the season could have been smoother. I would have kept episode 1 as the talent show. Realistically, I would have waved my hand and I would have removed that talent show entirely. And in my opinion, I think talent shows should honestly be reserved only for all-star seasons going forward. I think by then they have an established brand, they've got catchphrases maybe they've used on the show, they've got established looks and branding that has come out of them that would be easier to market through an all-stars vehicle, where when we're first getting to know them, something that is better is a dual runway and photo shoots, and leaning in on hometown looks. So, in my opinion, this should have been photo shoot heavy, and it should have been runway heavy, cutting out the show entirely, and I think there should have been an elimination here. I do love a non-elim in most of the international seasons, but Drag Race Thailand is getting its footing again, so it needs to throw out all of the punches and not try to be a copy pasta of everything else. It needs to reestablish itself because it is trying to be a more generic season. It has to really put in the punches and not kitty soft paws. Episode 2 I would change to be the Rusical. Now the reason for this is I'm a sucker for a large Rusical, even if that means that some parts are going to be a little more ensemble than others. And I feel like because this Rusical was so long, clocking in at over 10 minutes, it did feel a little bit deflated, with even Spicy playing 2 different roles. I think a few more roles would have fleshed out the story. I think it would have padded out the cast, and I think it would have helped things flow a little more smoothly. Episode 3 I would have changed to be the acting challenge. Follow a little more of the flow and format of season 6 of mainline Drag Race, with the Rusical and acting challenges being next to each other. This was again another excellent script, and keeping the same amount of contestants in this challenge to keep it cohesive I think is a good idea. So I would have kind of left this in the same position, since there would have been the same amount of participants this time around with the elimination happening in episode 1. Episode 4 I would make the improv challenge. And here's the reason. We needed just a little more time in this challenge. I still think it would have been really rapid and fast, but maybe with the amount of queens, the mini challenge wouldn't have gone so quickly and the main challenge wouldn't have gone so quickly. And it desperately needed at least one more group to make it less cringe. Theoretically, with 2 more queens, there would have been a little more synergy in the room. There would have been at least one more person to kind of pad out how bad the others in the room were, and maybe we wouldn't have gotten pairings like Gigi and Godland, who did not work well together. We could have even had something that had multiple layers of friction, with Gigi and Siam working together, ultimately learning that they are more similar to each other than they realize and being able to come to common ground. Episode 5 would be the Snatch Game. I think with only 7 contestants, this challenge would have definitely felt less bloated with a lack of comedy and interest, because the first time around was so unfunny. We needed to slim it down by just 1 to pull down the levels of awkward and uncomfortability that was present in this game. Episode 6 would be the top 6, where I would do the Sip Sip girl groups. Throw it back to UK1 where they had 2 groups of 3. I think this would have been much more cohesive. The queens would have had more time to kind of prep themselves, get their energy up, and this was the point before they were all completely exhausted, so they would have been able to give a lot to this challenge, and it wouldn't have been so bloated like it was the first time around. I think 3-person girl groups are far more effective than a 5-person girl group, and it would have been more impactful for the general story that was going on through this season. Episode 7 would then be the talk show. This challenge, as I mentioned before, desperately needed at least 1 or 2 more contestants to pad out how sorely of the thumb your idol stood out as a topic in comparison to past, present, and future, in my opinion. Those 3 topics work cohesively with each other, and your idol doesn't. So adding at least 1 more category, like your dreams, would have maybe felt a little more cohesive with your idol. And then those 2 categories wouldn't have felt so awkward on their own, being completely out of theme with the other 3. Episode 8 I would retain as the Pride Makeover. Cutting down just 1 contestant would not be that detrimental to the overall experience. And I'm kind of a big fan of the final few challenges being more design heavy. Plus, by this point, we'd have a really strong idea of their aesthetics, of who they are as performers, as queens. Obviously, we're able to show off their aesthetics a little bit better. For this episode, I think if we're trying to be a little more generic copy-paste of mainline seasons, this easily could have been a returning format where the judges get to choose someone who they think left a little early, pull them back into the competition, and get to see them compete. So then maybe we could keep all 5 of the makeover contestants they originally cast. And I think that would have maybe solidified itself as following the rubric as well as creating its own rules and flipping it all the way back to really old school seasons of Drag Race like season 3 and 4, where the judges had more authority in who came back than just a random returning lip sync SmackDown or something of the like. And finally, episode 9 would be the pageant ball. This would purely be to keep down the scale and make it more cohesive. The ball in early parts of the season do feel out of place. They lend for far less interesting looks because we're drowned and inundated with bad ones. So the good ones barely stand out. The bigger the pool, the more obvious it is how many swimmers are not prepared to be in it. Imagine a ball with only Frankie, ZP, Nane. And I mean, they're obsessed with Spicy Sunshine, so I guess she'd be there too, even though I'd rather it be Godland. That would be a far more interesting ball than it would have been earlier in the season. Plus, at this point, they were all exhausted, so having to model and do runways rather than push themselves into improv and comedy, where they were mentally not ready to do that, this would have been a little bit kinder of an experience for them because they simply were not prepared for the level of RuPaul copy-paste that was going to be infiltrating this season. They were not ready for the colonization of Drag Race Thailand. Plus, I think the stamina of this would have been easier to take rather than hearing 15 minutes of you wear it well. We could have maybe only heard 5 minutes of it. And with this format, I think it would have been much stronger throughout the entire season. I think it would have been more bearable, even though I still think that there are a lot of problems going on with Drag Race Thailand. This would have at least helped mitigate a few of those issues that I think so many of us are having with this season. And I will be doing one more video in just a few days of the many problems that I think happened this season that didn't exist in past seasons. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all on the flip.